Today I'm going to talk about why it can be dumb to lift the suspension of a vehicle. Now every time I find one of these vehicles that have been lifted up in the air, I can't help but remember the story about the old Canadian NHL hockey player. He was wearing a pair of these platform shoes when he went out drinking. Not really such a smart idea, either fashion-wise or physical-wise. Then he broke both of his ankles and couldn't play ice hockey for a whole year. Lifting a truck basically does the same type of damage over time. And sure, steel is stronger than human ankles, but over time, even it will end up breaking from being at the wrong angle all the time. I'll use the Chevy pickup as an example. It started out as a regular four-wheel drive Sierra pickup truck. But years later, someone came up with the idea of putting this giant lift kit on it. It is solid steel, I gotta admit, it's pretty well made. But by lifting it, you start to change all the angles of the steering and the drive shafts and the transmission. So things that were designed to work at one level are now at a different angle, and that causes wear problems over time. As you can see here on the front wheel drive shaft, it's at too deep of an angle going down, so it's going to strain the bearings and the boots and make things break over time. As you can see here, the boot's already ripped here, and this one's starting to leak grease, but the internal parts are worn too. So raising the vehicle often causes the tires to wear out faster. It's bad enough that these big tires cost more money. You don't want them wearing out faster too. And realize that tires with more aggressive patterns like these will also get worse gas mileage from the extra friction they create going down the road. And most of these vehicles already got low enough gas mileage, you don't want to make it any worse. And raising it up can also make the drive shafts wear out faster. I've seen many drive shafts fall off on these raised cars because they're at the wrong angle, then the joints wear out faster. And in a worst case scenario, I've seen them where the rear shaft of the transmission actually broke off. And if that happens, you're talking about a ton of money rebuilding the whole transmission because it was at the wrong angle, had too much stress, and then snapped right off. And of course, it can also lead to premature differential wear because that's now at the wrong angle. Instead of being straight, it's cantered up. And running thousands of miles with it at the wrong angle is eventually going to wear out the pinion gears. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel that safe working on an engine teetering on the edge of a ladder. And climbing in and out of them isn't that much fun either. Ugh. But that's nothing compared to how they ride on the road when you hit bumps. Because raising the suspension system really makes the ride extremely rough. And of course it compromises the handling too. When you take corners, you better be real careful so you don't tip over being so high. But there is one advantage to having them that high up in the air. They may break more, but you can get under them really easy without jacking them up to fix them when they do. All right, my grandson bought a lifted truck. And the big question is, am I going to disinherit him now? If you've watched any of my videos, you know I'm not a big fan of lifted trucks because of problems that they can have. So today, I'm going to show you the pluses and minuses of lifted trucks. Now granted, I checked this car out with him when he went to buy it, and it's an excellent truck. Under the hood, it's got the big 5.7 liter V8 I-Force engine. It's a powerful beast. This particular one is a 2012. And as we climb inside and start her up, listen to that baby purr. Typical Toyota quality. Smooth, it's not shaking. Now it does have 200,000 miles on it, but then again, I've seen many of them with over 500,000 miles. Original engines and trannies still in them. And he got a great deal on it. $7,500. I've seen these things go for $1,820 with that kind of mileage being a 2012. But as you can see, it's been lifted. It had a lot of modifications of steel putting it on so it can do some serious business. So what are the pros and cons? Well, let's start with the bad thing. Well, this is a big truck. The one bad thing about Toyota Tundras are they get pretty low gas mileage. Seriously, the best you're going to get this is in the high teens. And if you raise the vehicle, it's now less aerodynamic. I mean, look at my Celica. It's lower to the ground, it's more aerodynamic for better gas mileage. So the higher the vehicle, the more air resistance, the worse the gas mileage. And most guys who lift them like this truck, they put on bigger tires. The bigger the tires, the more radical the tread, the more the friction, Again, lower gas mileage. And of course, higher prices. My grandson priced 4 new tires, $600 a piece, baby. But on the other hand, it's not as bad as you might think. With all these modifications, this thing only gets about 1 mile a gallon worse than it would without all that stuff on. And of course, raising it up higher raises the center of gravity. The higher the center of gravity, the easier the vehicle can roll and flip over when you're cornering fast. That's one of the reasons race cars are so low to the ground, so they don't flip over in a race. You got to be careful with speed driving on these things if you get too high up in the air. And if you don't already know, as my grandson didn't until he bought it, if you're driving at higher speeds when it's windy outside, up in the air, these things are like giant sails. They get blown all over the road. You better hang on to that wheel tight. But of course, there are advantages of being higher. One, you can see a lot better. If there's accidents ahead, if something's going on, you can see a lot further toward the horizon. That's why the pirate ships had crow's nests on the top, so you can go up in the air and see what's going on around you. You can always have a guy standing up here looking around if you want. And of course, with all this extra clearance, you're not going to get stuck if you go off-road. If you get in really dirty, muddy roads out in the country. We're living in Tennessee here. We got a lot of land out in the country. This thing's great for that. And as you can see, it's also had the bumper modified. Solid steel. This baby's ready for action. Guy down the street has one. He pulled 19,000 pounds of plate steel. Had no problems at all. Lifted. Now this one was done pretty good. You can see it's got the off-road racing shocks that have been put on it. Longer brake hose assembly. The original guy that did that stuff didn't do that bad of a job. Got the serious front bumper. Now there's some steel. You can push things out of the way with this baby. You can see the front's a little higher than the back. I would have done the back a little bit differently. Put better rear shocks and beef up the rear suspension too, which wasn't done. But be that as it may, it's still higher, so even if you're just filling the bed and not towing something, you don't have to worry about dragging. This thing's still going to have tons of clearance while still being a relatively comfortable vehicle inside. Somebody took care of the interior too. For a work truck, this thing's in immaculate shape. Now as we go underneath, we can see this hasn't been too radically changed. You'll see that the drive shaft is not at too radical of an angle. If you lift them too high, then these things are down way too low. You can actually snap the yoke off the back of the transmission. But this was a relatively conservative lift, which is not that bad. But here's one big advantage of a lifted truck. Check it out. Look at all this room for working. You don't even have to jack it up in the air to work on half the stuff. Though truth be told, you're gonna need one big jack and some gigantic jack stands if you get a flat tire, and you're gonna have to change that out. Yes, it is a truck, and it does have an actual spare tire. So you don't have one of those baby spares, but you're still gonna have to jack the thing up and change the tire. Now since they're so high up and it's such a pain to change tires, you're gonna get one of these. There's two things you need. Get a tire plug kit, so if you do get a flat, you can fix it on the vehicle and not have to take it off. I've got videos showing you how to do that. And get a real solid air pump like this Fire that I've had for years. They're very simple. You just hook them up to the battery. That's it. Flip the switch, it pumps with a gauge. If you have to, do like I did. I spliced in longer wires so it will reach further. And realize this has a dual purpose. Get low on air, you can fill it up. You get a flat, you can fill it up. But let's say you get stuck in the mud or sand. You can let air out of the tire, it'll go flatter, have more traction, get out of the mud. Then you can fill it back up with your air pump. Brilliant idea. Just don't get some piece of crap that's all plastic. This, solid. It's Fire. I've had it for years. Things never let me down. It's got an accurate gauge, turns itself on. It's even got a cool little light on it if you want it. You can't see at night, you can turn the light on. It's solid metal. It's not plastic crap. This thing pumps them up fast. It's reliable. As you can see with the metal, it has cooling fins. So it's not one of those cheap plastic ones that it gets hot, the plastic melts. This is metal. You use it, it gets hot. It's not going to melt the metal. It really works well. That's what you want, a good one, not some cheap piece of plastic crap. So let's take this lifted truck for a ride and see how it goes. Well, it's Toyota, so it starts right up. And as I said, you got a high view. You're high up in the air here. You can certainly see where you're going. The lift hasn't adversely affected transmission. You step on it, downshifts, take your foot off, shifts up very smoothly. Now, as you can see here, the tire pressure warning light is on, but you expect that because it's got the fancy tires. I checked, they don't even have sensors in them. Whoever put those bigger tires and rims on, they didn't put tire pressure sensors in them. I checked with my machine, but who cares? Air pressure gauges work perfectly fine if you check them every once in a while. Now, I do have to say, driving around the neighborhood, you feel like king of the highway. You're way up in the air. You can certainly see a long way out into the fields there. And it's not windy today, so I don't feel any wind buffeting yet. Now, yes, this is a big, heavy truck. There's no arguing that. So let's come to a stop here, and we'll see what these 300 plus horsepower will do. On your mark, get set, go. It gets up and goes, and you can see it still shifts really smooth. Makes that roaring V8 noise. And those fence posts are just starting to fly by. Now, since this truck hasn't been radically lifted, you notice the transmission shifts fine. It doesn't have any particularly bad handling aspects. It hasn't been raised insanely high, and the tires are larger than stock, but they're not big, gigantic monster truck tires with mud tread. They're gonna make a ton of noise. You can hear cruising down the road. It's not that noisy. Pretty quiet inside the cabin. It still has very stable handling. If we go from lane to lane, handles good, doesn't have any particular problems. And as we come to a stop, still idles like a dream. No shake, no nothing. Doesn't matter that it's got 200,000 plus miles on it. The only rumble I feel here is the dump truck that's next to us at the red light. So now you know a little bit more about lifted trucks, so you can make a wise decision. And I guess I won't disinherit my grandson, because it is a pretty good truck. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.